It's Wednesday, October 1st, 2025, and I'm tracking a pattern change that's in the forecast that could flip the script as we head towards the middle of the month. For now, I'm tracking some heat across a good portion of the country, including some 80s for most of the Midwest and even some 90s for the Southern Plains. And I'm also tracking some below average temperatures for parts of the Northwest, where we have much needed rain making its way into the forecast for parts of Oregon and Washington. And although for most of the country it's a warmer than normal start to October, we will have some changes as we head through the month. For now, this is the start to the month of October, as we will continue to see above average temperatures, at least for the first 2 weeks. But this is an average. That doesn't mean it will be above average the entire time. There will be some cooler periods, but overall, most of the days will be warmer than we see cooler days across much of the country. So here's a look at the upper atmospheric pattern as we can see ridges and troughs represented by red colors and blue colors. As we see that trough build in over parts of the Midwest and Northeast, headed towards that mid-October timeframe, this is where we could be talking about below average temperatures here on the way. It's not going to be with us very long, but we could be talking about temperatures as cool as 15 to 20 degrees below average in spots. That could constitute frost and freeze advisories over a good portion of parts of the Midwest, potentially into the Northeast, and maybe a little bit of snow for some locations. Meanwhile, as we head off to the West Coast, which is starting cool for the month of October, we'll flip that around and most likely be dealing with some above average temperatures for a few days when this happens. The overall pattern, though, still looking to be above average in terms of high temperature for most of the first few weeks of the month. So here's the forecast from the American model as we head through the next several days. You can see that cooler air starting to work its way in by about the 10th and 11th. This will be into the Northeast first, but eventually we get a secondary reinforcement over the Midwest that will start to bring temperatures way down and potentially as cold as 10 to 15, even 20 degrees below average. Of course, this is the long range model. We're most likely not going to see this exact setup here, but I do think at least some parts of the Midwest and some parts of the Northeast will be looking at some cooler than average, potentially significantly cooler than average air as we head towards the middle of the month. And we get a second opinion here from the European model, which isn't quite as aggressive with the cooler air. So we do see that cool down right here sweeping across the country, but it doesn't quite make it to the Northeast. So there's probably a better chance of seeing the below average temperatures for the Midwest than parts of the Northeast, but I still think northern New England, upstate New York could see some below average temperatures and maybe some snow in higher elevations. And with a significant cool down this time of the year, you do have opportunities for thunderstorms. And we will see that as we head through the next couple of weeks here. So far, quiet this week, but we will eventually see some storm action towards the end of the week and weekend. And then eventually, with the cold front coming in for the 10th and the 11th and 12th, that'll be sweeping across. That'll spark a chance for some stronger storms. I don't think we're going to see widespread severe weather with any event here because we just don't quite have enough storm energy, but there will be a chance of at least some severe weather isolated in nature, and that's all a part of that cold air surge, which will push a lot of the heat out of the forecast here. As we also track the moisture levels, we do have some tropical humidity that's situated along the Gulf as it pushes north into the Midwest. Notice by the 6th, we'll have that cold front, the initial front push in 6th through the 10th. We will start to see some of that humidity go away, and that doesn't leave quite enough fuel for the secondary front to produce widespread severe weather. So this is another factor here. You take out some of that moisture, and that should limit the severe activity, but it's not set in stone. We're still several days out here. There could still be enough energy for that secondary front that's much stronger to produce some stronger storms, but we will see what happens with that. As of now, it looks like the initial front that comes in as we head towards the weekend, towards the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th will dry things out, and then that secondary front does struggle a bit to produce stronger storms because of the lack of moisture. And we take a look at future radar here. We take this more or less with a grain of salt because the storms won't be pinpoint in this model. It gives us just a general idea of where the fronts may be as they sweep through the Midwest and then eventually the Northeast. But the timing will change. It could change by a day or two when it's this far out. 7 days or a week plus. So this is something we'll be watching. Of course, the model is indicating that we will see most likely some storms at some point with the front moving through, and then that secondary front that sweeps across the country with potentially some snow behind it. If it continues to set up shop across the upper Midwest, at least the upper level low attached to that front, we could see some snow for parts of upstate Minnesota, going to northern Wisconsin and northern Michigan, the UP. That is not unusual this time of the year. That does happen from time to time. So locations in the Midwest may range from slightly below average to well below average with this setup. This also lines up fairly well with our winter outlook. So the idea is as the ocean patterns and other global patterns start to change, we will eventually see more shots of colder air work their way south, and that will create opportunities for shots of below average air time and time again. And that will eventually lead to a below average winter for a good portion of the upper Midwest going into the Northeast. Meanwhile, the warmer air, warmer than average, should remain in the South. We're not going to see this pattern set up quite yet, but it's just an indication early season that we have the pattern in place for those cold air outbreaks. Now we take a look at the tropics. We have two tropical systems next to each other, Hurricane Umberto and Hurricane Imelda. Both systems are going to be moving east-northeast and eventually out to sea. However, there's one landmass that could have an issue with these storms, and that's Bermuda. And here's the latest forecast from the National Hurricane Center, where we have two systems impacting Bermuda, but now the latest forecast from the National Hurricane Center has Imelda making a direct impact on the island as a Category 2 hurricane as it continues to strengthen and move to the east. Right now it's a Category 1 storm, as well as Umberto. We'll be tracking both these storms as they affect Bermuda. So this is the wind gust forecast as we take it over the next few days. Notice how Umberto's threat stays to the north, but Imelda comes in with a direct impact, most likely Category 2 strength, potentially gusts upwards of 100 miles per hour. But it's a good thing Bermuda is well fortified for hurricanes, as it does stick out quite a bit. But we also have some significant wave action to watch here. And as you can see with the wave height forecast, notice how Umberto stays to the north, but upwards of 20 to 25 foot waves coming in for Bermuda, maybe even as high as 30 foot waves. Like I mentioned, Bermuda is well fortified. That does include the shoreline, so there probably won't be too much in terms of severe impacts, but certainly something to watch as the hurricane does pass by. It is going to most likely make landfall or come pretty close to doing it over the island before it heads out to sea. And Bermuda will also see a ton of rain from Imelda, certainly better than South Carolina seeing this type of rain, which was in the forecast last week, but definitely that shift to the east made all the difference, keeping the heaviest rain away from North and South Carolina. But this storm system will be dropping at least 7 to 10 inches of rain over the island of Bermuda. So looking ahead, we'll be tracking that heat over a good portion of the Midwest and plains, eventually shifting to parts of the Northeast. But eventually there will be a pattern change that flips this around towards the middle part of the month, where we'll get some nice crisp fall air on the way, maybe even feeling like winter in some spots, and that is going to allow some storms to return to the forecast as a couple of cold fronts make their way through parts of the U.S. They'll be tracking the tropics to see if there's any more storm development. Of course, we still have several more weeks of the hurricane season, but eventually we will see things calm down as we head over the next few weeks. Once we get into November, that's the tail end of the season as we start to head towards winter. And I'll have updates on all of these things over the next several days.